denied citizenship, forced from their homes and subjected to extreme cruelty. Nearly 400,000 Rohingya people have fled Myanmar to nearby Bangladesh since the violence broke out in late August this year. Thousands more are believed to be stranded in the mountains of the northern Rakhine State, and some of whom are severely injured. This is the story of the Rohingya people. What happened to them, and where are they now? These people are being denied basic aid because NGOs and humanitarian organisations are not being allowed access to the area. We look at the plight of the Rohingya people, the ethnic cleansing of Rohingya Muslims.
So I've been working with Burma Campaign for 16 years now. It is a human rights organisation, and we campaign for human rights and democracy and development in Burma. We provide advocacy and campaigning to ensure that governments around the world work to improve human rights in Burma and help Burma develop into a democratic country. The current crisis of the Rohingya in Burma is an absolute tragedy. It's heartbreaking to see the scenes from the over 400,000 Rohingya refugees that have been forced to flee across the border from Burma into Bangladesh to escape attacks by the Burmese army.
They arrive alone, and it's very important for us to take care of these children who are not accompanied or separated, because these children are particularly vulnerable. They deserve a very specific protection, not only nutrition, health, but also we need to protect these children so that they don't go into prostitution, they don't face abuses.
The Rohingya Muslims made up 1.1 million people in Myanmar before the crisis, totaling 52 million of the country's population. Nearly all Rohingya in Myanmar live in the western coastal state of Rakhine and are not allowed to leave without government permission. It is one of the poorest states in the country, with ghetto-like camps and a lack of basic services and opportunities, where they have coexisted alongside Buddhists for decades. The Rohingya people describe themselves as the descendants of Muslims, Persian and Arab traders who came to Myanmar in the 5th century AD. Unlike the Buddhist community, they speak a language similar to the Bengali dialect of Chittagong in Bangladesh. They are not considered one of the country's 135 official ethnic groups and have been denied citizenship in Myanmar since 1982, which has effectively rendered them stateless.
Burma has been under military dictatorship since the 1960s. It had a brief period of parliamentary democratic rule after its independence from the British Empire. However, it spent decades under brutal military dictatorship. And this dictatorship has really tried to force a Burman Buddhist outlook onto the country. So it has spent the decades persecuting Burma's many ethnic minorities and religious minorities. The Rohingya in particular have been subjected to persistent persecution over the many years. The movement for democracy and ethnic rights has struggled for many years to bring democracy to the country, but unfortunately we still don't see Burma as a democratic country at the moment. It's become a hybrid situation. Burma has been ruled by a brutal military dictatorship since 1962, so it spent many decades under military dictatorship, a dictatorship that persecuted Burma's many ethnic groups and religious minorities. And in 2015, there were general elections, and that brought in Aung San Suu Kyi's party and her National League for Democracy. However, this 2008 constitution is fundamentally undemocratic. What it does is to ensure that the military have ultimate control. It still controls key ministries such as defence, border affairs, the police, much of the judiciary are beyond any sort of civilian control. And so that means that the civilian government is forced to share power with the military still holding an effective veto over any further democratic changes because it has 25% of seats automatically guaranteed to soldiers in parliament. So we see a system where the military is very much in control. They've created a system where they have maintained their fundamental political and economic control of the country, but have created a system that has a surface level of democracy. In fact, last year, the UN set up a fact-finding mission to investigate crimes against humanity and war crimes committed by the Burmese army, not only against Rohingya in Rakhine State, but also against other ethnic minorities, particularly Kachin and Shan.
Violence broke out in northern Rakhine State on the 25th of August 2017 when an uprising by a group of Rohingyans frustrated by the many years of persecution attacked government forces. In response, security forces supported by Buddhist military launched a clearance operation of the Rohingyan people that has killed at least 1,000 and forced close to 1 million to flee their homes. The UN's top human rights officials said on the 11th of September this year that the military's response was clearly disproportionate and warned that Myanmar's treatment of its Rohingya minority appears to be a textbook example of ethnic cleansing. Myanmar, formerly known as Burma, has a population of around 52 million people. It's a multi-religious country with no official state religion. According to the Burmese government, 88% of the population practice Buddhism, in particular the Bamar, Rakhine, Shan, Mon, Karen people and Chinese ethnic groups. The Burman ethnic group constitutes around 2/3 of this 52 million figure and controls the military and the government. But there are also more than 135 ethnic groups in the country, each with their own culture. Many of them have become internally displaced by government moves to exploit land, provoking long-standing friction. In fact, the conflict between Myanmar's ethnic minorities and the ruling Burmese majority represents one of the world's longest ongoing conflicts. Likewise, the Muslim Rohingya are not recognized as an ethnic nationality of Myanmar, so they suffer from arguably the worst discrimination and human rights abuses of all.
I think the military have been very effective in their rule. They were often dismissed as superstitious, crazy, but in fact they've been very disciplined, very united and coordinated in their rule, and they've been very effective at disarming international pressure as well. And we see, now that they're committing ethnic cleansing, they feel that they can confidently do that with impunity because they've never faced any real consequences for the crimes that they've committed.
The most prominent and most powerful testimonies which came through 4 or 5 video presentations as well as verbal presentation and documentation was about rape. Rape is being used very powerfully as a means of ethnic cleansing and as a means of genocide.
Well, under the 2008 constitution drafted by the military, one of the conditions that they had was that Aung San Suu Kyi couldn't be president. So they wrote in clauses that effectively barred her from becoming president. However, she created a new role as state councillor, and in that role she is effectively the head of government in Burma, while Tin Shaw, who is president, is more of a figurehead.
The Burmese military is a military that has no history of accountability. It is a military that has a long reputation of systematic and pervasive abuses when it goes into the field.
মানুষ বেড়িয়ান লতা দিন আর হাড়ের বেড়িয়ান মানুষ পয়েন্ট ফাঁদ দিন জ্বর করা দের গিয়া খুঁড়ের তো বাদ গুসাহার আর আলিকিন বলে হয় মানুষের গুস্তাহার গা চেঁচা চেঁচা জ্বরা দিদি ওরে গিয়া লই যার গই নেমেরে চেঁচা লই যার গই
I call on the Myanmar authorities to suspend military action, end the violence, uphold the rule of law, and recognize the right of return of all those who had to leave the country.
This is unacceptable. And this is going to, in many ways, I think, define the direction that Burma will take.
There is a grave humanitarian crisis underway that requires urgent attention.
I think by the very nature of the Nobel laureates speaking out to that effect shows how serious the situation is.
Let me reiterate the urgent call to the authorities in Myanmar to stop violence.
Our request to the government of Myanmar for cooperation.
Do you believe this is ethnic cleansing?
When 1/3 of the Rohingya population had to flee the country, can you find a better word to describe it?
We are committed to a sustainable solution that will lead to peace, stability, and development for all communities within the state. We are determined to persevere in our endeavor to achieve harmony, peace, and prosperity in the Rakhine State.
Well, I think the speech today, much anticipated obviously, was an indication that this government, the civilian government, is basically burying their head in the sand about the horrors that are unfolding in Rakhine State. At times it was a mixture of untruths and victim blaming, and I think for us really it just seemed like an attempt to downplay the situation when, you know, we have people across the border in Bangladesh who are documenting the most horrific abuses as part of this campaign of ethnic cleansing.
Aung San Suu Kyi has not been silent on this crisis. She has consistently denied that human rights abuses are being committed against Rohingya and indeed other ethnic minorities, and she has defended the actions of the Burmese military. The President has also reflected these opinions too. The military dictatorship over many years have fostered great prejudice against Burma's ethnic minorities, but particularly against Muslim communities, and there's been massive anti-Muslim propaganda in Burma, which means that many people in Burma do share these prejudices against Muslims in Burma. There's a very sort of casual racism if you visit that people that you find. And certainly, you know, the government has been complicit in this as well. You know, they have also been putting out great propaganda on social media and in papers that reinforce people's prejudices that, for example, Rohingya are illegal Bengali immigrants and that they shouldn't be in the country. And that's what's so incredibly kind of disappointing, that Aung San Suu Kyi's government and Aung San Suu Kyi has not used her incredible moral and popular authority within the country to try and challenge these prejudices, but seems to have taken the decision to kind of reinforce them rather than really challenge them.
1 month after Rohingya Muslims started pouring across the border to escape a crackdown in Myanmar, Bangladesh faces a long-term struggle caring for more than 700,000 refugees packed into camps and forcing its neighbour to take them back. Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina has earned praise for opening up the frontier, but she cannot expect much international help in either campaign, diplomats and experts say. And Bangladesh's open door policy could easily sour if solutions are not found. About 430,000 of the Muslim minority have streamed into Bangladesh since August the 25th, when attacks by Rohingya fighters in Rakhine State unleashed a blitz by the Buddhist-dominated nation's military. The influx adds to about 300,000 Rohingya already in camps around the Bangladesh town of Cox's Bazar. There is not enough food, water or medicine to go around, and the human excrement on roads around the camps only adds to UN fears that serious diseases could quickly break out. The country has reacted with compassion to horrific tales of rape and killings told by the refugees.
মানুষ যেতেন বেগিং গিয়ে আই গুড়া গলের যাইগে না ভারি তো যাইগে না ভারিবার পাঁচজন আছে তারা পাঁচজনের তো তিনজন থেকে থেকে আরেকজনে বাজু টাজু খুলে ফেলাই আরেকজনে নিলাম আনি জামাই মরতানি ধরিব হেন এবার জামাই তারা মিক্কা গিয়ে তারা আমরা মায়া ভাঙ্কুন ঘরত আসছিলাম.
They came into their houses and at first beat them very hostily, pulling here and beating here and there, also give bite in the genital part, in the breast, and then when they become more tired, then they started to rape her.
The stories that we have heard of the violence are horrifying, are devastating. And what I know is that they are more than enough to justify us defining these people as refugees and therefore deserving of international protection.
It's absolutely heartbreaking to see the tragedy that is unfolding in Burma, and also one that was entirely predictable, and steps could have been taken to prevent what is happening. I was in Burma earlier this year. I was in so-called camps for refugees, for Rohingya that were forced from their homes in violence in 2012. And there are 120,000 Rohingya living in effectively prison camps. They're not allowed to leave, education and health is denied, the camps are absolutely squalid. And the situation now is the same facing those internally displaced people from the recent conflict. And I was also in other areas in Kachin and Shan State, where also, we've seen the Burmese army launching attacks against ethnic minorities there. So the situation is still absolutely desperate for Burma's, particularly Burma's many religious and ethnic minorities.
My experience there, in summary, was an eye-opener. It was heartbreaking just to see the situation of people and the need for us as charities to maintain momentum in humanitarian efforts. It was, for me, just to witness the desperation of people feeling completely isolated in a domain of their own and feeling extremely vulnerable. It was very close to my heart. It was heartbreaking. It was almost like seeing some images in reality, living and breathing the condition and situation. We walked into the village through some very heavy tropical rain. There were no drainage system. It was extremely muddy. The condition, or the living condition of the people was extremely poor. Their houses were made of very thin local bamboo shoots. Some had doors, some didn't. The reality of the trauma, the thirst, the starvation was all very real, and it was extremely heartbreaking to witness what I had witnessed. I have never seen anything like this before.
লঞ্চা হদি মারের তেন দিলা মারি ফেলের হাড়ি ফেলে দরগরা দের
tayi nazariya faran basane fari
fara fara de zati mori de midere dale kuradi bela bedo baadi eta dale tumara shanti kori farga de feri de nori deni beju medi e mari fela ashi de faran basai balla odo faran dite dale feri medi.
What I witnessed last week was trauma and some serious psychological issues. What I saw last week was heartbreaking. What I saw last week was people with absolutely nothing. In fact, I can share a story with you that's very touching and very moving. He's a guy with 7 children. He had lost his wife during that journey from Mongdo into Bangladesh. And by the time he had made it to the Bangladesh border, he had realised there was only 6 children with him. And one of them was a 1-year-old child who went missing. And he didn't know what the child was. He was so disturbed and disillusioned. He couldn't even tell us where the child had gone, how the child had gone missing during that journey.
We really need to see urgent action from the international community. You know, what we've seen so far is an embrace of the military and a rush to step up trade and investment. We need to see that change. We need to see real pressure put on the military to stop these atrocities. So we need to see, for example, a UN global arms embargo. We need to see countries impose unilateral arms embargoes to stop training in cooperation with the military. We need to see targeted economic sanctions against the military to target them specifically. But at the moment, all we've seen is words and a pitiful lack of action from the international community in the face of what is one of the worst human rights and humanitarian crises that Burma has seen.
For decades, unrest has rocked northern Rakhine State because of a wider context of long-standing discrimination against the Rohingya in Myanmar. And since the horrific event on the 25th of August, Myanmar has denied allegations of ethnic cleansing, saying the military offensive was a clearance operation to flush out Rohingya fighters who had staged attacks on border posts in August. It has also refused to allow international observers to investigate. More than 500,000 Rohingya have fled Myanmar, most arriving in Bangladesh by foot or by boat, with aid agencies struggling to cope with the influx. At present, the crisis undoubtedly represents the most extreme and disproportionate onslaught of violence, with widely corroborated horror tales from Rohingya refugees of savagely violent gang rapes, merciless tortures and beheadings, and even babies tossed into fires. If not genocide, what might we call the horrendous situation unfolding in northern Rakhine?